A number of months ago, Hitler's speeches were being translated into English by AI, and they started making the rounds. Some people, mostly on the right, were nodding, saying, wow, this makes a lot of sense. Maybe this guy was right. But it only made sense to them because they weren't hearing the whole thing. They were hearing these carefully cherry-picked lines. Here's a clip that a lot of them agreed with.
The German nation does not wish its interests to be determined and controlled by any foreign nation, France to the French, England to the English, America to the Americans, and Germany to the Germans. We are resolved to prevent the settlement in our country of a strange people which was capable of snatching for itself all the leading positions in the land, and to oust it, for it is our will to educate our own nation for these leading positions.
Now, why this hits home for some Americans is they hear things like America to the Americans, and they think about border security and illegal immigration or jobs going overseas. They hear we should educate our own people for leadership and think about self-reliance and putting Americans first and rejecting foreign influence in government or business. And it's easy to see why that sounds familiar. It mirrors the rhetoric used in U.S. politics right now for everything from protecting the homeland to closing borders and to prioritizing our people. But here's the problem. In Hitler's mouth, strange people didn't mean immigrants in general. It meant Jews. Jews that were already living in Germany, who he intended to strip of their rights and remove them from society. It wasn't about protecting jobs. It was about removing human beings from the nation entirely. And the part that connects with people, it only connects with them because it's out of context. It just sounds like generic nationalism and America for Americans. To them, that feels like common sense. But here's what they were ignoring.
Today, I will once more be a prophet. If the international Jewish financiers in and outside Europe should succeed in plunging the nations once more into a world war, then the result will not be the Bolshevization of the earth and thus the victory of Jewry, but the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe. The nations are no longer willing to die on the battlefield so that this unstable international race may profiteer from a war or satisfy its Old Testament vengeance.
See, you can't separate those two things. That protect the homeland line that people were nodding along to, that was the sales pitch for genocide. Agreeing with the first part means agreeing with the destination. And then he says the result will be the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe. And that's where those reasonable sound bites were always meant to lead. If you sign on to the opening act, whether you know it or not, you're signing on to the finale. Here's where it almost gets laughable if it weren't so dangerous. A lot of those same people nodding along to those patriotic Hitler quotes are voting Republican, a party that calls itself pro-Israel. Israel is a nation founded as a safe homeland for Jewish people after Hitler tried to wipe them all out. You can't wave the Israeli flag with one hand and give a thumbs up to Hitler's rhetoric with the other. That's not just a contradiction, that's moral whiplash. And yeah, not every Israeli is Jewish, but exterminating Jews was the core of Hitler's politics. It was his point. Hitler didn't start with death camps. He started with these things: make Germany great again, banning books, targeting the press, blaming immigrants, creating enemies out of neighbors, defunding the arts, stoking fear of outsiders, and demonizing educators. Does that sound familiar? Because that is how authoritarian regimes normalize hate before they start to commit atrocities. You divide the population, you feed fear, and you silence independent voices. Once the groundwork is in place, the rest becomes possible. Since January, we have watched the authoritarian playbook move from theory into practice. Through the Schedule F overhaul and other moves under Project 2025, Trump has replaced career civil servants with loyalists. His administration has attacked independent media, sued media outlets, and slashed funding for outlets like PBS. DEI programs have been dismantled nationwide. Trump has deployed the National Guard and the Marines in Los Angeles, and now he's deploying the National Guard in D.C., and he's threatening to send them to other cities like Chicago and New York and Los Angeles again. Anti-immigrant crackdowns have escalated, targeting communities far beyond those accused of crimes. So what do we watch for next? The scaffolding is up. In the next 12 months, we will be able to tell whether the United States is going to become a fully built authoritarian state or not. So here's what you can keep your eyes on. A full centralization of power to the executive branch. Basically moves to bypass Congress and subsequently neutralize the courts entirely. Continued expansion of domestic troop deployments, using the National Guard or federal forces in politically opposed cities or states. Formalizing loyalty over law. Look for more purges of nonpartisan officials replaced by political operatives in law enforcement, intelligence, and the judiciary. A widening of targeted crackdowns, not just immigration raids, but open arrests or investigations of journalists, political opponents, and activists. Look for tighter propaganda control. increase state-friendly media funding, intimidation of remaining independent outlets, and coordinated messaging through their loyal networks. Look for new categories of legal discrimination, laws or executive orders targeting LGBTQ+ rights, voter access, or religious freedoms for disfavored groups. Look for the escalating us versus them rhetoric. They'll do that by branding more Americans as enemies of the state to justify extraordinary measures. If you see 3 or 4 of these happening in parallel, understand we are way past politics as usual. That's the machinery of authoritarianism up and running at full power. When you cut away all the context to make Hitler sound reasonable, you're not seeing through the lies of history. What you're doing is seeing what propaganda is designed to do, and that's making hate feel like home. Propaganda doesn't need people to swallow it all at once. It just needs them to take the first bite. History has already told us how this story ends. Hate loses, fear loses, division loses. And if you need proof, there's a reason the last name Hitler isn't around anymore. It never wins in the long run.